Hi everyone, welcome to Art of the Bay Sessions, where we chat with wonderful artists from around the Bay Area. Before we get into the interview, make sure you hit that subscribe button to catch future episodes and other fun content. Now let's jump into the interview. Thanks again!
And welcome back, everybody. And we have our good friend, Shelong Yang. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I have you as a growth manager, a project manager, a producer, game designer, and overall just a cool person.
Well, I don't know about the last one, but yeah, I've jumped around different roles before.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Yeah, thanks again for taking the time to do this interview. And
of course.
First off, I guess I just want to congratulate you so far on all the progress you've made on your latest game, Spirit Becoming. So yeah, I just kind of want to maybe jump into, just for everyone to kind of get to know you a little bit more, since you and I met many moons ago.
It's been several years.
Yeah, way back at Sony, and we even went to the same school together. But we'll definitely cover that in a little bit. But I guess for those who are just getting familiar with your work, can you provide us a brief timeline of your art career so far?
Yeah. As you mentioned, I'm currently a growth manager at NCSoft. So I'm working on the marketing side now. It's actually one of the first times that I'm working in games, but not necessarily on the product. So it's definitely a different change. It's less hectic. I get more exposure to a lot of the sides that I didn't really have exposure to before. Mm-hmm. I'm doing a lot of work with user acquisition, the PMM team, but I'm still also working very closely with the product team because I'm still also working on the lifecycle marketing as well. Before this though, I was working at Shinzone and I was a project manager there. Mm-hmm. Kind of bounced back and forth between live ops and design. Really managing the processes there and really helping out the teams there to kind of, make their processes smooth. I could go on and on about my whole career. Right. Graduated back in 2008. As you mentioned, you and I went to the same school, and really it kind of just went on from there. Getting into the game industry at the time was a little hard, and I definitely remember kind of bouncing around various careers and various jobs until I was able to get into Sony and really become, really get into industry there and work in QA there. Mm-hmm. And then, from there, it's came to where I am now.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to get into those stories later on, but it's kind of insane how this industry is also very small, where once we met all those people back at school, at Sony, and even the early days at Zynga, that pretty much you're interconnected with the same amount of people in the same network. So it's amazing to see that that amount of folks who are still connected to this day,
Right.
Cool. So you mentioned that you were a growth manager. For those who don't really know the ins and outs of the industry, what kind of responsibilities come with that role?
Yeah, I think the role is pretty unique across different companies. The one that my responsibilities, I'm really in charge of reaching out to our players, coming up with different cohorts for all the different players, mm-hmm. so that we can target them and make sure that, we're exposing them to not only the right features, the right messages, the right communications, but also making sure that we are preventing churn and we're lowering churn. So, on the product side, and it's I guess my role is kind of, I have like different hats. So when I'm working with community and CS, they're working on the social side. So I'm mm-hmm. also working with them, kind of talking with them about like what type of players we should be reaching out to. On the user acquisition side, we're coming up with different target audiences. On the product side, we're looking at the various life cycles of the game, and it's my job to really kind of make that consistent across all of our titles.
Oh, okay.
So I'm working with product managers to kind of go through what our basic user segmentation should be, what type of personas we should be reaching out to, and right. What type of messaging they should be getting, what type of communications we should send out to them, whether it's a push notification or email or mm-hmm. anything else.
Yeah, like those are, I think that's the important thing that a lot of people don't see when they initially see any type of gaming on the back end where all those
Right.
things are so calculated and it's all kind of like specced out where
Oh yeah, definitely.
for the most part, especially like when you and I were back in school, it was hard to kind of see that bigger picture of everything because
It really was. Yeah.
yeah, because we definitely saw it in a way where we saw the games, we saw the graphics, and once we saw like that side of like, okay, here's the game engine, and this is what you do to create games. But then when you see like all that other technical and like analysis behind it, it's just like it's a machine in itself, you know?
Right. No, it definitely is.
Yeah. So I guess yeah, in general, like I know you and I have a pretty good game background, or I should say gaming background, where we grew up on pretty much the era where we were coming up with like Nintendo and Super Nintendo and like all the console wars that kind of came after. What were some of your influences growing up? And this could be game influences, or it could also just be art influences overall.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure every person who's worked in the game industry has the same story I have. But I mean, I remember drawing, as soon as I could pick up a pencil. And I've been drawing since elementary. I've been drawing anything from my homework to just random stuff at home. I think the first real impact into games was the old school Nintendo with Mario. I remember working, actually playing that with my family because my parents were young at the time, and so they were playing that. And my aunts and uncles, they would come over, and we'd all just be playing that. I think the first real impact of like, how far games could really go was Ocarina of Time for me. And when I first saw the trailer, I was like, "Whoa!" I was like, "What is this? Like, it looks so cool. It looks so much better than Mario. What is this?" And then, when I played it, it blew my mind. I was just like, "Okay, well, like, what is this?" Like I've never seen a game like this. And like there's been multiple games that have been amazing out there, but for my own personal experiences, like it was Ocarina of Time. It was in Nintendo 64, and I was a little jealous of the PlayStation owners, but it was like it's cool. I'll stick with Nintendo.
Right.
And and then from there, it just kind of kept growing, and I kept always thinking about like, like how do they make all these characters? How do they make them move? And me not understanding computer science at all, and not understanding programming at all, I was like, do they specify whether or not I can actually do this? Like, if I decide to go left, did the programmer think that, hey, like Shelong gonna go left, let's make it do this? But it was definitely made me think more about like just how beautiful it was, just thinking more about how it works and how everything functioned.
Yeah, it's very much like a magic trick or an illusion where as a child, if you see that, then you're just like blown away by like the imagination and the creativity that goes behind it. And then when you get a little bit older and kind of see more of the behind the scenes and notice like what actually goes behind to make those, then I think your appreciation of it kind of goes even higher than it was when you were a kid.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I can definitely relate to that when it comes to just being blown away as a child, and then later on just really seeing like what's behind the hood and just kind of like breaking everything down. So that's awesome. So tell us more a little bit of your first games here, and I definitely have checked out High Low, or I should say High Low, and what kind of goes into that, where kind of what we were talking about with Ocarina of Time, where is it more that it's an inspiration of games and other influences that you enjoyed to kind of inspire you to make a game like this, or is it more of kind of creating something for a demand that's out there?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, I'm definitely not a programmer, so a lot of these games I made, it's just straight because I was bored one day and I was like, hey, like I'm just gonna make something, and I'm just gonna make random stuff. And I definitely have a backlog of random stuff where it's like I never turned to a game, I never turned into anything feasible. I was just playing around.
Yeah.
The ones that are actually released, they were something where I guess I was bored long enough to make it worthwhile and turn it into something. With High Low, it's based off a card game, and a lot of people know the card game. They play with actual cards, and I figured, well, why don't I just turn it into an app? Why don't I turn it into a game about probability, so that you can actually kind of guess what's coming up? And there's been changes to it here and there. I first started out and you were kind of just blind to a deck, and you kind of just playing. You're just like, do I have 52 cards? Do I have 100? I don't know, right? So you're just kind of just playing. I did change that up, so I have fine-tuned it, and now it's just, you have a deck of 52, and you're kind of playing around with that. So, and then with my other game that I created, Bubble Bubbles Pop, that one honestly was just me playing around with how do I spawn different actors, different entities. Right. How do I play around with particles? How do I play around with this? And it became this little click thing. I was like, all right, I'm just going to release it. And, at least it gives me more exposure to releasing apps and maintaining them and kind of working on with that. And, it was kind of like my first dive of like, can I do this? Can I do this by myself? Do I need an artist on the side? Do I need a programmer to really help with this? And there definitely are a lot of projects where I wish I had more people and I had more, I had a team to actually work with to make something more complex possible. But at the same time, it's like, I'm not in the position to really do that yet. So a lot of it is just playing around. And with Spirit Becoming, that was another, like, I'm bored, I'm just going to do something. And it started out like just me playing around with how to build this thing. And eventually it became this, this project where I've gotten so deep into it that I can't just give it up. So.
Right. Yeah. I think it's great that you're doing that, because I think a lot of it, and, I think you and I have a similar background when it comes to creating art. And it doesn't have to necessarily be with video games, but when it comes to just coming up with a general sketch or working on like a painting or whatever, that a lot of the time we do have that fear of just like not putting something out because we don't think it's at its best quality. But the thing that we've learned in general is that it's better to create something and put it out there just so like you can learn from it. And I think that's a lot of the things that a lot of younger artists, they take a while for people to realize that, just because there is that fear that you're kind of putting something out there that you created. So you're a little bit worried about like either the criticism or just like the presentation of what you put out there. But that's amazing that you're able to build that confidence to know that, okay, I'm going to create it, even if it has to just be me and kind of put it out there, then at least I know. And I'm glad that you mentioned that whole aspect of putting it out there and being able to maintain it, because I think that's a lot of the things too that a lot of people don't consider, is that there's a lot of maintenance when it comes to putting out
definitely
projects like this, where it's not as simple as like, when you create a sketch that, okay, it's out there and it's kind of done. But in this case, you do have to maintain it with updates, and then just kind of also maintain it when it comes to like whatever engine engine or server that it's on, that those are always constantly updating. So you also have to update it as well.
Yeah, definitely. And as you mentioned, like Google and Apple, they always update their SDKs, their API. So every now and then I'm always getting emails like, hey, your app is about to get removed in 30 days. You might want to update this thing. And those kind of things are like, okay, like I stopped working on it. Why do I?
Exactly.
Okay, let me jump in. Let me jump in and find out where I left off. Like what was I last doing? And sometimes I'll find something like, oh right, I was going to release that feature and then I stopped working on it. And or other times I'm just like, I have no idea what I was doing. I guess I'll just add this in and I'll just remove something. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. To kind of put it in perspective for more traditional artists, that would be the equivalent if you painted something on a canvas and then a couple months down the line they asked you to move that painting over to a different canvas. Like, how am I supposed to do that kind of thing? Awesome. So we were mentioning that you and I went to the same school at Art Institute of San Francisco, and we both went after our game art and design program. I guess this is also kind of a good refresher for me, because I know we haven't talked about this in a couple of years, but what kind of made you decide to kind of go into that specific major versus any of the other programs that they had available? And I guess overall too, like, what was your overall experience of art school?
Yeah. I mean, I think it really started back when I was in high school. I knew I always wanted to get into tech. But as with any high school kid from a small town, you're like, do I want to get to tech where I have no idea what it's about and my family has no exposure to it? Or do I want to kind of do something safer, and kind of go into the health field? So I really pitched that to my parents one night, and I was just like, hey, mom, dad, what do you guys want? me to do? Like, you guys want me to go into the medical field, or do you guys want me to go into I said tech at the time, but in my head I knew it was video games.
Yeah.
So I said, you guys want me to go work with computers? And they're like, yeah, we want you to work in computers because that's the future. So from there I was like, okay, cool. Like, I looked into computer science, and I think at the time I had no exposure to programming. I had no idea what it is. Computer science to me sounded really scary. And, I was just like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be stuck in like a cubicle working on a computer. And the idea of creating video games, creating something really beautiful to release was more enticing. And so I started looking into that, and I definitely looked at a few different colleges. I think I looked at the Arts Institute twice or three times or something. I think the first time they had like a $300 application fee, and I was like, I don't have that money. Especially if I don't know if I'm going to get accepted. So, but yeah, no, eventually came to school here. I honestly wanted to go to games. Animation was cool. Programming sounded cool, but I wanted to go to games. I wanted to work in the game industry. I wanted to be a designer. I wanted to be the person who was like, hey, these things are called Pokemon, and this is what you do with them, and you go there and program, and you go over there and make the art. I wanted to be that guy, and that's my idea of how video games worked at the time. And completely wrong idea. That was not even how an industry works at all. But that was my idea, and so I was like, okay, I want to be that person. Of course, as you can also say this, the curriculum was different from what I expected.
Right.
There's a lot more art in there. There's a lot more working with 3D and kind of doing more of that versus design. But I think I'm kind of okay with that, because it gave me a lot of exposure to just the 3D side of it, and I'm kind of glad that all that happened, because as I mentioned, I've always loved drawing, and I've always loved art, and like, much love to the artists out there, but I could never be an artist as a career, because I love it too much to really do it as a living. I say that because I love video games, and now I'm creating video games for a living, and I can't play games the same way anymore.
Right.
Every time I play a game, I'm like, oh, like, why they do that? Oh, they missed a bug. It's like, oh, I get that. Yeah, that was part of priority C, and it's okay. Just ship it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my thought process now, and so I'm actually really glad that they taught more art side, because it allows me to do what I'm able to do now, where I can learn more about programming. I can learn more about algorithms and really work on that side. But the art side is something that it's really, really difficult. And I'm glad I like drawing, but it's definitely hard for me. It's one of the harder aspects of what I'm doing. It takes much longer than I think it should. And, like, I still have to look up a lot of different tutorials, and I still have to look up a lot of different ways, and depending on the program I'm using. But I'm kind of glad that I went to an art school that was kind of based on 3D art, and maybe it would have helped if there was a bit more traditional like digital painting, but it's okay. I'll stick with 3D.
No, I think you pretty much nailed it, where I felt the same way, where there was kind of a shift where for me anyway, the first half definitely felt more art heavy. And then finally, the second half did start getting more into the technical end when it came to using the 3D programs and learning the early programming stages. It's very interesting that you mentioned that. Yeah, when you start doing it, that you can never see games the same way again, because that's been literally my whole experience, probably ever since we graduated from art school. Is that or I should say, once I graduated high school and once we started doing some of the game design stuff at Zynga, that I don't think I've ever played a game from start to finish ever again since then, just because of that same mentality that you're like, okay, I know what this core loop is, I know what these mechanics are, that it kind of it takes a little bit away from the magic, that you're just like, you just know what is going to happen until you get to the next milestone. So it's very interesting. So I definitely know that there's a lot of a lot of game designers and just people in general in the gaming industry that still can be super passionate about playing video games even after spending X amount of hours developing them. But yeah, it's just definitely one of those things that if you're trying to test yourself on like if it is your true passion, then yeah, you'll definitely see that when you start going into school and getting into your entry level positions. That's
Agreed.
awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess we just want to get more into the personal side. So I guess when you're not developing or playing games,
Right.
what are some of your hobbies? When you're not working on anything game related.
Yeah. Honestly, I try to do something that's a little different. I can never really get away from video games, so that's always there.
Yeah.
I've been, I love reading, so I pick up different books. I guess I can bounce back and forth between different types of genres, but I love reading fantasy books, so that's stuff that I've been reading before and kind of just getting to it. And then recently, I've been reading a lot more like finance and small business books. Kind of reading those. That kind of keeps me going. Breaks me away from just developing games and drawing, I guess.
Yeah.
My wife can also attest to the fact that I do random crafts. So
nice.
Sometimes I'll be on YouTube or on Facebook, and then I see some DIYs, and they're like, "Hey, I just built a cabinet out of like a filing cabinet." And I'm like, "Ooh." So I'll be like, "Hey, honey, you want to go to Home Depot? You want to go to Lowe's, and you want to go pick up some random stuff?" And she's always like, "No," but she eventually gives in, and then I'll spend a few weeks in doing stuff, and then I end up not creating anything. I actually have a pretty embarrassing story. I had an IKEA bookcase, and it was still pretty good. It's pretty good shape, I decided that I was gonna make it, and IKEA, the furniture is kind of like, I guess it's like plywood, faux wood,
right.
And so I'm like, it'd be cool if I turned it into like a more bougie bookcase.
Yeah.
So I went and picked up all this wood and bought all these things, and I'm like, in my head I was like, it's gonna look perfect, and then I was like building it, and then I think like 4 weeks went by where I just wasn't working on it, and eventually I kind of just gave up, and I'm like, that's not gonna happen, and split it out on my front yard, and someone came by and picked it up.
Oh, wow.
I have a lot of those stories where I pick up projects and I start for doing projects, and then I eventually give up because it just doesn't turn out the way I plan. Like I get it, measure twice, cut once, but no.
Yeah.
I love working with my hands. It's just my hands don't like working with me.
Yeah. No, I can relate. I can relate to that. I'm in a similar boat where my dad is a carpenter pretty much. So literally his whole thing is that he builds stuff. And I don't know if you can see it behind me. I have one of the arcade 1-ups.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And it's very similar where they are pretty much kind of like IKEA setups where it should be these simple, you just build it yourself. And they said the estimated time, it should take you no more than an hour. And I think I was on there for like about 3 hours. And then by the time I finished that, I realized that I put something on the opposite way at the very beginning. So then I had to like break everything down and just like, So I'm definitely in that same thing where, I can try to be creative and do all these things, but will my hands actually listen to what I'm trying to do is a different story.
Exactly. Yeah.
With that, what are some of the games that you've played more recently that are kind of either inspirational to you to kind of create art, or just inspiration for you to kind of work on your own projects at that point?
Hard question. Well, I mean, not too hard. I'm just distracted easily, I guess.
Yeah.
I've been playing a lot of recent games. So I think the most recent one was Death Stranding that I got for Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
Which seems like it's years ago.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So I got that for Christmas. I've been playing it. But I also decided that I should go back and play the other games I didn't finish, like God of War.
Right.
Was it Horizon Zero Dawn?
Mm-hmm.
I never actually finished those. I still have them kind of just sitting there. Witcher 3, they're all kind of just sitting there. And I have a few more that I want to get this year that I might just leave sitting there again. So
yeah.
No, I played I bounce back and forth between that a lot. It depends on how I feel like, but I don't know what it is now, but I get anxious when I'm like playing games, because then it's like I have this voice in the back of my head where it's like, you should be doing something else, and you should be working on your projects instead. And it's good because it kind of keeps me motivated. I'll play Death Stranding for like 30 minutes. I'm like, I should go do something else. Like, do I want to play games forever? Or do I want to make a game?
Yeah.
But it's also really bad because it makes me anxious. Like when I'm playing a game, I feel like, like it's like someone's gonna pop up and be like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I can totally relate to that, because even now, I think the only time I've been playing games recently is because we've been trying to work up a little bit with our Twitch channel, and it's the same way where that's really the only time that I make time out specifically to play games. But right after that, then it's back to working on either my own project or just something for work. That I rarely find, even in these times, that I rarely find those moments that just like plug in like an old console and start playing. So I can definitely relate to that on that end, where you would think now of all times that we have all the time in the world, but even now
yeah, especially now where I'm just like, I have all this time, I shouldn't be wasting it playing games. I should be doing something. And I mean, I need to be better at that, but it's okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying.
Yeah. It's a balance for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So maybe you want to get a little bit more into details with Spirit Becoming that. If you want to give folks more of a kind of like an elevator pitch and what you have going on so far into production.
Yeah. So Spirit Becoming is an interactive choose your own adventure type of game. It's basically a story about a young man who is placed into a world that seems familiar but not entirely familiar to him. And so he has to navigate this world in order to reach the end. And depending on the choices you make, or depending on the path you take, you can end up in one of 4 different endings.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm going to keep certain aspects, hidden.
Yeah,
just because that's like those are good selling points. But you're basically this character, and you have to make a decision on whether or not you should help certain people or ignore certain people. And these decisions will dictate basically how your adventure goes. There's still a few things that I'm experimenting with. I want to see if I can really make it work. But I think one of earlier I mentioned that I had a few setbacks. One of them was a pretty big one, where I spent several weeks working on the art, and I had a certain art style in mind, and I wanted that art style. And then I finished it. Like I finally finished all. I think it was like 80 or 90 different backgrounds.
Right.
And I was like, I'm done. Like I don't have to do this again. And then I put into the game, and I'm looking through it, and I have some close family kind of just taking a look, and then we're just like, the style is just not up to par with what I want it to be. And so I had to kind of like go back to square one and rethink about what I wanted to do. And I haven't, again, I found the art style I wanted. I'm like, okay, I think this is achievable. I think this is something that I can be proud to launch with. I just finished drawing everything by hand, like a few days ago. And then now I'm running into an issue where I can't paint it the way I want it to be painted. So, problems of an artist. And, yeah. So I'm running into that issue right now. On top of, kind of just creating the game and making it, polishing it and fixing bugs and kind of running through the storyline, making sure everything is perfect. But, I have to keep reminding myself that, try not to shoot for perfection and really shoot for progress. I think that's better and in the long run, and it really gives me more time to kind of grow. And, that way, if I release it and it completely bombs, I don't feel so bad, and I don't feel like I wasted my entire time.
Yeah.
But if it does well, then I'm like, okay, cool. It's a good surprise there.
Right. Yeah, I think that's always the hard part, is that I think it's also related to any traditional art, where if you're so close to the finish line, so to speak, when it comes to any project that you're working on. But then if either in yourself or from initial feedback that you get, that people say that, oh, what if it goes in this direction, and or if you change this, then once you agree with that feedback, then it is really hard to get it kind of out of the back of your head, so to speak, because it would be the equivalent of saying like if you were racing in like a marathon and you were this close, but then you were to like tell yourself you have to go back like a couple of laps or miles or whatever it is, that it's such a hard thing to do. But when you know that you're in that mentality of like, okay, yeah, I should do this if I really want to make it the best that it can be, and to put out something that I'm really proud of putting out versus just to finish something. And I know that we just mentioned that it's good to put stuff out there even if it's not complete, but I think that's where it's when you're initially starting, that you're really trying to like just get the experience and everything. But when it is when you're working on these bigger projects and in grander scope, that's where you do want to kind of take a little bit more time and really care and put the care into it, and put a lot of the polish compared to previous projects that you've done before.
Right. Yeah.
Did you also come up with the narrative yourself for this?
I did. Yeah. So it's based off an experience that a subset of this population. So I'm keeping certain key terms,
of course,
private, you know.
Yeah.
So, but it's based off certain experiences that certain like a subset of this population go through, and it definitely inspired by it. It is not in any way like a true to fact recollection of anyone's experience or how it really goes, but it's inspired by these stories, and it basically is my retelling of what could potentially happen to this person if this was to happen. And so it basically, it's based off like what really happens, but it's not entirely true.
I think that's always the hard part too, when you are kind of multitasking on a smaller base like this, when it is just you or just like a few people creating a game firsthand, that you do have to kind of wear multiple hats. So at that point, it is kind of hard to juggle between, like in your case, creating the actual game in the programming sense, then the art, and then the narrative. That those are all huge like components in themselves, and that's why like these larger studios have separate separate like departments for those specific areas. That I think if you kind of go into that without knowing the production flow firsthand, like how you and I have based on our experience in the game industry, then it might seem a little bit overwhelming. But I would imagine that you've kind of taken some best practices from everything that we've gone through in these different industries to kind of like know like what to do it in order to kind of like kind of maintain it for yourself, and to kind of like produce, but also schedule everything out in a better way, I guess.
Yes. Definitely. No, definitely taking a lot of experiences and really using that to kind of help me go along here. As you mentioned, there's multiple hats I have to wear, and sometimes I'm wearing like two hats at once, and I'm kind of bouncing back and forth doing something. Like I think the other day I was drawing, and I got really bored of that, and I got really tired, and I was like, okay, like my back hurt, my eyes are they're kind of twitching now. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go and just kind of work on the coding side a little bit. So I started doing that a little bit more. Then I was kind of able to come back because it's just kind of breaking away from drawing was enough to kind of refresh my mind and refresh my eyes and come back to it. So yeah, it's good. It's good and bad that I'm wearing multiple hats.
Yeah. And I think you kind of spoke into something that I did want to ask you right after, where based on that it is a lot of work when it comes to putting on those multiple hats, but that sense of the reward is with all that work is that it's pretty much all in your control, that you're not having to report to anybody or really like kind of go back and forth between a ton of production staff to see like what key decisions need to be made. Like it's pretty much all in your hands. When did that kind of come into your head where like after working on different projects at different companies, that when did it kind of come into your mind that, okay, what if I start working on my own project and kind of make my own studio to kind of put that into place where like, okay, now it's literally there's no limit. Like my only limit is my imagination, and that I can actually just go out there and create something versus having to kind of follow, not the orders. I'm trying to think of a better word for it, but kind of to really just make something on your own versus making something someone else's project at that point.
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's just my idea of the projects, and there are always things where I don't know if I actually want to follow through. Like it might just be something to work on, kind of waste time on, or it might be something bigger. It's never been anything where it's like, oh, I'm going to create a Candy Crush clone or anything like that.
Right.
It's always been something like, oh, that was a cool game I played, or oh, that was a cool ad that I saw. Like, but what if I just try to make something like that? And then sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. And I guess I just don't want to be pulling anyone through those random projects.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be telling an artist or a programmer, be like, hey, can you guys build this thing in like 3 weeks?
Yeah.
And after 3 weeks is like, no, never mind. I got bored of it.
Yeah.
Or I just stop calling them and I'm like, no, like I'll email you guys later.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just easier if I just do something myself and kind of just build it out. I don't really have anyone to set expectations with. I don't have anyone to disappoint. I don't really have to convince anyone to work on something, and so it's just always been easier. Definitely, well, not easier, but it's easier to get started, not easier to keep going.
Yeah.
But I mean, if this game does well, and if the next ones that I'm working on do well, then I'm actually hoping to continue growing and hopefully being able to sustain actually paying someone or paying a team to kind of work with me. So
yeah. And I think that's the other aspect too, is that once you start growing, then like you do kind of have to start bringing in the input from others, and I think that's a careful balancing act in itself. So hopefully,
right.
When it's no lie when they said like with more success comes more responsibility. So definitely it's one of those paths that everyone has to kind of go through and learn from personal experience. So kind of leading into that too, I would say that you and I, have been probably in the industry now for a little over 10 years now. So we've definitely seen our fair share of positive and negatives when it comes to the gaming industry, and I guess just in general, like the tech industry. For younger artists, I guess, who are just kind of getting their feet wet and also trying to break into the industry, what kind of advice would you say that, like, for example, like a entry level game designer, like what kind of steps would you recommend to kind of like for them to get their foot into the industry, and any personal experience that you can kind of give away at that point?
Staying true, staying real. Get used to doing the tedious stuff. You're as the entry level designer, you're definitely going to have a lot to learn.
Yeah.
But you probably also have a lot of the tedious, data entry tasks and kind of working on adding random stuff. And I've never worked in like the console side of the industry, so I definitely don't know how that is. But on the mobile side, an associate designer, especially if someone who's just started, you'd probably be doing a lot of learning. And if you were willing to do these tasks, it definitely does help. It's tedious, but it helps you learn why they're needed, and it helps you learn a lot about the different systems. Learn to love math. I think all the designers I worked with have been like amazing mathematicians. So learn to love it. Learn to be able to build out different formulas, different battle formulas on how to calculate the type of damages that are happening. If you can do that, and these formulas are like, they're huge, and if you can do that, that's a very, very valuable skill to have. So definitely that. And oh man, learn to love Excel. Designers love Excel. Not just designers, but designers especially love Excel.
Right.
Or I guess love and hate it, but everything is in Excel. So learn to love it, learn to use the formulas, learn to make things easier in Excel, learn how to actually, aggregate data, learn how to actually analyze data. And I realize all that stuff is not exactly stuff you can really learn on your own. So, pick up a tutorial, go through YouTube, kind of just learn your own. You're going to be doing a lot of that. And whether you're a senior or an associate designer, you're going to be doing a lot of work where that involves both Excel and math. And there's a fancy side where a lot of it is kind of just coming up with cool mechanics.
Right.
But once all that is done, you're the one who has to figure out how those mechanics work. So, how does it get implemented? How does that actually work on the back end? And a programmer is not going to be like, oh, cool, that was a cool design, I'll go and figure out the back end. No, they're going to need you to tell them how it's going to work on the back end so that they can actually code that.
Right.
So get used to doing that. You're not just going to be writing a bunch of fancy words onto, like a Word or anything like that, and then giving it to other people to create. So get used to actually being able to explain the technical side of how your mechanic work, how your feature works. And I think you doing that and everything else you can kind of pick up on the side and kind of learn as you go. In the industry, get used to working long hours. There definitely are some companies where it's great and you get to go home at 5 or 6, but get used to working long hours. And, it helps you kind of learn the industry. So, if you're young and you don't have kids and you don't, you can put in those hours, it'd be great because it's definitely a lot of experience.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that you said, where I think adaptability is the biggest thing that a lot of people have to do, and realize that it comes with the territory with this industry, that everything that you mentioned, that the more work that you put at the very beginning, where it can't just be like you think of a cool idea and then you just kind of run with it. You do have to think about every aspect about that cool idea. So there has to be a reason why you introduce certain game mechanics. It just can't be a one-time use, because you're just wasting the programmer's time. You're wasting your time. That it has to be something important and vital to the overall game design and to the game itself. Or else there's no point of putting it in there in the first place. So it's really looking at it from every aspect and knowing that, okay, once I create this, it's going to affect this, and this. So you have to really kind of see it like a game of chess, where you just have to really see every move once you introduce something new into it. So I definitely agree with everything that you mentioned there. Cool. So I know this one's a little bit of a harder question, but it is the last question. Where over the last few years, I guess, what has been either your favorite project to work on, or it could be multiple projects as well. Have they been more personal projects, or have they been collaborative projects from everything that we've kind of worked on at different studios?
Definitely a hard question. I've had a lot of different projects, both personal and professional, that I've personally enjoyed. But I think most of my favorites are definitely personal projects, and it's just because I can do what I want. I can create a crappy project, or I can create something that I think is cool. And I can, like as you mentioned earlier, I can decide if it goes this way or that way, and I make other decisions. So those are always the projects I enjoy the most, because sometimes it's just me kind of just learning how to do something, or me kind of just testing something out to see how it works. And I think that kind of goes back to why I have so many random crafts. Sometimes I just want to make something. So. Yeah.
That's always the important thing, is that you kind of have that freedom to start and end something whenever you want. That a lot of the times that we don't really get that choice when we do work at other industries, because even if we don't really believe in the project, or aren't passionate about the specific project that we're on, like I'm kind of looking at poker from back at where a couple people are just stuck there. But it's just an example that going back to what we were saying about for people who are trying to get in the industry, you kind of have to like prepare to be in that mental state too, of you may not be on a project initially that you're excited about, but you do have to find the positives in those too, where you make the most of it. You try to learn as much as you can, and definitely try to kind of like absorb everything like a sponge at that point to really make the most out of a negative situation in those senses. So
definitely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. I want to be respectful of your time. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Did you have any other plugs or mentions that you wanted to give out before we head out here?
Go check out High and Low, and of course, if you wanted to, go check out Bubble Bubbles Pop. They won't blow you away. that project is coming. But hey, check it out. And if you have any questions on how they're made, why I decided to do it, beyond what you've seen here, definitely hit me up. You can hit me up, and I promise I will answer. I don't check that email often, but I will answer. Keep an eye out. I have, as I mentioned, Spirit coming, which is also the great thing about working by myself. I don't have to really set deadlines. I mean, They help to kind of keep me on track, but I don't really have to answer to anyone about my deadlines. So.
Yeah, that is the best thing of it all.
All right.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll definitely keep an eye out for the game when it comes out, and we'll definitely promote it on our social media channels as well when it does come out.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you again. And we'll talk to you soon.
Cool. Thank you. See ya.
Take care.
If you enjoyed the fun chat, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks again for watching.